An entire civilization thrived in absolute secrecy far below the Earth's surface. This is the reality of the Cappadocia Underground Cities, one of history's most profound architectural puzzles. By the end of our journey, you will understand the incredible engineering that allowed thousands to vanish from sight for months at a time. We will uncover how these vast, multi-level labyrinths were built, who carved them from the living rock, and what desperate threats forced people to create a world in perpetual darkness. What does such a hidden city reveal about our own will to survive against impossible odds? The ground beneath their feet was a gift from fire. Millions of years ago, twin volcanic giants, Mount Erciyes and Mount Hassan, erupted with a fury that blanketed this entire region of central Turkey. They did not spew destructive lava, but something far more malleable, a thick layer of volcanic ash that compressed over epochs into a soft, porous rock called tuff. This is the canvas upon which the underground cities were carved. The landscape that resulted is almost otherworldly, a vast, undulating terrain of deep valleys and surreal, cone-shaped rock formations that locals call fairy chimneys. It looks less like our planet and more like a dream of another, but this soft stone was the key to everything. It was firm enough to hold its shape, yet pliable enough to be excavated with simple bronze and iron tools. An entire city could be chiseled from the earth without the need for supporting beams or complex masonry. The rock itself was the structure. This unique geography naturally attracted human settlement with a history of refuge that stretches back millennia. The earliest whispers point to the Hittites, a powerful Bronze Age empire, as the first to dig simple shelters here over 3,000 years ago. Later, empires like the Persians and the Romans held sway, but it was the early Christians who truly expanded these subterranean dreams into vast, multi-level realities. Facing relentless persecution from the Roman authorities, these communities needed more than just hiding places. They needed entire worlds where they could live, worship, and survive in total secrecy. The soft tuff of Cappadocia offered them that possibility. So, while the rock was shaped by volcanoes, the cities themselves were carved by desperation and faith. This was not a short-term project, but a centuries-long act of collective defiance, a slow, deliberate burrowing into safety. The very earth became both sanctuary and fortress. For centuries, the full extent of this hidden world remained just a rumor, a local secret whispered between generations. The modern rediscovery began not with a grand expedition, but with a simple, curious act. In 1963, a man in the town of Derinkuyu was renovating his home. After knocking down a wall in his basement, he found a mysterious, dark passageway. Venturing inside, he found not a single room, but an entire labyrinth descending into the abyss. This was the moment the Earth gave up one of its greatest secrets. Word spread quickly, drawing archaeologists and explorers who began the painstaking work of mapping the void. Their findings defied all expectation. They realized they were not looking at a simple shelter, but at a vast, interconnected network of cities. To date, over 200 separate underground cities have been identified across Cappadocia, a staggering number that speaks to a society built around subterranean life. The most famous of these are Derinkuyu and Cappadocia, each a marvel of underground engineering. The scale is almost impossible to process. These were not mere caves, but vertical metropolises carved with astonishing precision. Derinkuyu, the deepest, plunges 18 levels down into the earth, a depth equivalent to a modern skyscraper buried underground. It is estimated that this single city could have sheltered up to 20,000 people, along with their livestock and food supplies for months on end. Picture a population the size of a small modern town, all living, working, and breathing in a meticulously organized world of total darkness. The sheer volume of rock removed to create these spaces is a testament to a communal effort spanning generations. This was not a panic room, it was an entire civilization waiting in the wings of history. descending into one of these cities is like stepping into a massive, inverted apartment building. The deeper you go, the more you realize this vertical design was a masterpiece of defensive engineering. Each level was a strategic barrier. The uppermost floors typically housed the stables and storage areas for food. Think of this as the first line of defense. If an enemy did manage to breach the entrance, they would be met by animals and supplies, a confusing and crowded space that masked the true depth of the city below. The living quarters, workshops, and communal kitchens were carved into the middle levels. This was the bustling heart of the city where daily life continued. And far below, in the deepest, most secure levels, lay the most vital spaces, the wine presses, the cellars, and the breathtakingly beautiful chapels and churches. This separation was not just about organization, it was about survival. The stables on the upper levels acted as a natural buffer. The body heat from thousands of animals helped to regulate the temperature of the entire complex, providing a crucial source of warmth during long, cold months underground. Meanwhile, the depth provided a perfect, naturally cool climate for storing precious food and fermenting wine, a staple of life. The entire structure functioned as a single, living organism. Massive, circular stone doors weighing hundreds of kilograms could be rolled across key corridors, sealing off entire sections in an instant. These were not just doors, they were impenetrable walls operated from within and impossible to force open from the other side. Every single feature, from the vertical separation of spaces to the labyrinthine corridors, served a dual purpose, enabling both community and security in a world of perpetual shadow. Among these ingenious defenses, one feature stands out as the ultimate guardian, the Great Stone Door. Picture a solid disc of rock, taller than a person and weighing as much as a small car. These were not simple slabs, they were massive, circular millstones, meticulously carved to fit perfectly into specially designed slots in the corridor walls. In times of peace, they stood recessed to the side, allowing free movement. But at the first sign of danger, a small team of defenders could leverage their weight, rolling them into place to seal a passageway completely. From the other side, an enemy would be confronted by a seamless wall of solid rock. There were no handles to grip, no cracks to pry at, no weak points to target. It was an impenetrable barrier operated solely from within the safe side. The effectiveness of this simple design is breathtaking. A single one of these doors could isolate an entire section of the city, trapping any invaders who had managed to get that far in a dead-end corridor while protecting the thousands of citizens deeper within the labyrinth. But the defensive strategy was even more sophisticated than a single door. These millstones were placed at strategic choke points throughout the vertical city, creating a series of independent defensible zones. If one door was somehow compromised, the next one could be sealed, creating a cascading failure for any attacking force. This meant that even if a city was breached, it could not be easily conquered. The invaders would find themselves lost in a dark, confusing maze, constantly being funneled into kill zones and blocked by these unmovable stone wheels. It was a passive defense system of unparalleled efficiency, requiring no constant vigilance, only the strength to roll the stone when the alarm was raised. This was the final, absolute word in security, a literal wall that could be summoned from the architecture itself, separating light from darkness, safety from peril, and life from a forgotten end in the deep. Yet even the strongest door is useless without breathable air. A city of 20,000 people sealed underground would consume its oxygen in a matter of hours, turning their sanctuary into a tomb. The true genius of these cities lies not just in their defenses, but in their invisible, life-giving infrastructure. The architects of this underground world engineered a perfect respiratory system, a network of ventilation shafts that reached from the deepest chambers all the way to the surface. These were not simple holes. Some of these air shafts plunged down over 100 feet, carved with painstaking precision to connect to every major level of the city. They functioned like a set of colossal stone lungs, constantly drawing fresh, cool air from the surface down into the depths while expelling the stale, warm air used by the inhabitants and their livestock. This created a continuous, natural circulation that kept the atmosphere not just breathable but surprisingly comfortable. How could such a massive exchange of air happen without any mechanical pumps? The answer lies in basic physics masterfully applied. The heat generated by thousands of living bodies and animals deep underground created a powerful upward draft in the shafts, literally pulling the stale air out. As this warm air rose and escaped, it created a vacuum that, in turn, drew a steady stream of fresh, cooler air down through other dedicated shafts. It was a perfectly balanced, self-regulating system that required no fuel and never slept. But such a critical system also presented a grave vulnerability. An open shaft is a direct line to the surface, a potential entry point for enemies or a telltale sign of the city's hidden location. The solution was a masterpiece of camouflage. On the surface, these ventilation openings were meticulously disguised. They might look like nothing more than a natural fissure in the rock, a small, unmarked hole among the countless ferry chimneys, or even be incorporated into an existing above-ground well. From above, they were virtually invisible, allowing the city to breathe while remaining completely concealed. This network did more than just supply oxygen, it also controlled moisture, preventing the damp, moldy conditions that would have made long-term survival impossible. This was not mere architecture, it was a life support system carved from stone, ensuring that a community could live and thrive in a world without sun or sky for months on end. The air itself became a silent, faithful guardian. But a city needs more than just air to survive. It needs the one resource that is both a source of life and a potential agent of disaster: water. Without a secure and plentiful supply, the entire subterranean refuge would become a death trap within days. The solution was as brilliant as the ventilation shafts, a hidden network of wells and channels that reached deep into the Earth's own plumbing. The engineers did not dig storage cisterns to collect rainwater, a risky and unreliable method. Instead, they tunneled all the way down to the water table, tapping directly into underground aquifers. These were not simple holes with buckets. They were sophisticated, protected shafts, often descending over 50 meters through solid rock to reach the purest water, completely isolated from the surface world and any potential contamination. This direct tap into a natural aquifer meant the city had a constant, renewable source of fresh water, a literal life spring from the deep earth. The water was then channeled through a carefully sloped network of carved stone conduits, directing it to central collection points on various levels. This gravity-fed system required no pumps and never ran dry, ensuring that every resident, from the highest stable to the lowest chapel, had access to this vital resource. Think of the profound sense of security this provided. While enemies on the surface might control all the rivers and springs, the people below had their own private, inexhaustible river, flowing silently in the dark, completely unknown to the world above. Yet, with thousands of people consuming water, another critical question emerges. What happened to the waste? In a sealed environment, human waste and contaminated water would quickly breed disease, creating a threat as deadly as any invading army. The subterranean architects had a remarkably modern solution: a managed sanitation system. They carved out dedicated, deep-lying pits that functioned as septic tanks, often located far from the freshwater wells to prevent any cross-contamination. Waste was channeled to these isolated chambers where it could be contained and naturally break down over time. More than that, the entire city was designed with a subtle, consistent downward slope in its main passageways. This was not an accident. This gentle incline allowed for the efficient channeling of both fresh water and wastewater. Spills, runoff, and used water could be directed away from living and cooking areas, helping to maintain a baseline of hygiene that was nothing short of miraculous for the ancient world. This combination of deep, protected wells and managed waste disposal created a closed-loop system of public health. It was a delicate biological balance maintained in total darkness, a testament to a sophisticated understanding of urban planning long before the concept even had a name. The ability to manage water and waste so effectively was what transformed these underground labyrinths from temporary bolt holes into true, long-term habitats. It was the final, crucial piece of the puzzle that allowed a civilization to not just hide, but to truly live deep beneath the feet of their enemies. So how did a community of thousands actually live in this sunless world? The private spaces were intimate, to say the least. Families lived in small, windowless rooms carved directly from the rock, each one just large enough for sleeping niches and a few personal belongings. These were not spacious apartments, but secure, warm cocoons. The walls still bear the marks of the tools that shaped them and the soot from the small oil lamps that provided the only illumination, a flickering, precious light that pushed back the absolute blackness. Life was intensely communal out of sheer necessity. Beyond the private rooms lay the shared heart of the city, the vast communal kitchens. Here, you would not find roaring fireplaces, for open flames would have consumed the precious oxygen and filled the shafts with smoke. Instead, cooking was done in large, shared clay ovens, their heat concentrated and their smoke carefully channeled upward through specific, narrow vents. The diet was simple and sturdy, built for survival, consisting of grains, dried legumes, and whatever could be stored for months in the cool, constant temperature of the deep cellars. Wine, pressed in the lowest levels, was a crucial part of daily life, providing calories and a small measure of comfort. Socially, the entire city functioned like a single, large family. There were no palaces or grand houses down here, no separate quarters for the rich and powerful. In the face of a common threat, a powerful social equality likely took hold. Everyone shared the same air, the same water, the same dangers. Leadership would have been practical, based on who knew the labyrinth best, who could manage the food stores, or who provided spiritual guidance in the chapels carved deep below. The greatest challenge beyond the physical needs was psychological. How do you maintain morale when you cannot see the sun for months? The rhythm of day and night was replaced by the rhythm of lamps being lit and extinguished. The sound of the world was not wind or bird song, but the constant low hum of voices echoing through stone, the distant bleating of sheep, and the drip of water in the deep wells. They maintained their humanity through routine, through worship in their underground churches, and through the shared, unbreakable purpose of keeping one another alive. In this world of endless night, every meal shared, every prayer whispered in the chapel, every child safely put to bed was a quiet victory against the darkness pressing in from all sides. Deep in the cool, silent heart of the city, they carved their faith directly into the stone. These were not just places to hide, but places to worship, to find solace, and to reaffirm their identity under the most extreme pressure. The underground churches of Cappadocia are some of the most moving spaces in the entire complex. Here, in the absolute darkness, artisans created beautiful sanctuaries complete with domed ceilings, intricate columns, and altars all hewn from the living rock. They carved baptismal fonts for initiating new members into their community and painstakingly painted biblical scenes and crosses on the walls, their colors a vibrant defiance of the oppressive blackness that surrounded them. These frescoes were not merely decoration, they were a visual scripture, a way to teach their stories and hold onto their beliefs when the world above had turned against them. This profound need for a sacred space directly supports the leading theory about who built these cities and why. During the early centuries of Christianity, followers of this new faith faced brutal persecution from the Roman Empire. To be discovered was to face imprisonment, torture, or execution. They needed more than a hiding place, they needed a fortress for their very souls. These underground cities provided the perfect solution, offering a secret world where they could practice their religion freely and without fear. The churches were the spiritual anchors of this hidden society. In a life devoid of sunlight, the flickering lamplight dancing across a painted fresco of a saint or a scene of resurrection would have been a powerful reminder of hope and a promise of a world beyond their stone walls. The act of gathering to pray, to sing hymns in hushed tones that echoed through the caverns, to share a communal meal in the presence of their carved altars, this was what kept their spirit alive. It transformed a desperate survival bunker into a consecrated refuge. The cities were not just a military secret, they were a deeply held religious one. Every roll of the great stone door was not only a physical barrier against soldiers, it was a barrier against an empire determined to erase their faith. The endurance of these beautifully carved chapels, hidden for centuries, tells us that for these early Christians, survival and spirituality were two sides of the same coin, both essential, both carved from the same unyielding rock. The psychological and spiritual strength of this hidden community would have meant nothing without a full larder. To sustain 20,000 people for months, the city needed to function like a self-sufficient ark, and its true treasure lay in the vast, silent storage chambers carved deep within the earth. These were not simple pantries, but monumental granaries designed to hold enough food to outlast any siege. The most vital of these stores was grain, the absolute foundation of their survival. They carved out massive, sealed silos, often shaped like giant, bell-shaped jars directly into the rock floor. These pits could be filled from the top and then sealed with a heavy stone lid, creating an airtight environment that protected the precious wheat, barley, and lentils from moisture, insects, and rot. The scale of these storage rooms is staggering, with some complexes containing dozens of such silos, each one holding enough grain to feed hundreds of people. This was a long-term investment in survival, a physical bank of calories that meant the difference between life and a slow, collective starvation. But how could such vast quantities of perishable food last for years without spoiling? The answer lies in the very rock that surrounded them. The thick layers of volcanic tuff acted as a giant, natural refrigerator. The stone provided near-perfect insulation, maintaining a constant, cool temperature between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius, or about 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. This stable, chilled environment was ideal for preserving not just grain, but also dried fruits, legumes, and nuts. It slowed down the biological processes that cause food to decay, effectively allowing them to store their harvests for multiple years. The city itself was a preservation chamber, a cold storage facility on a colossal scale. Beyond dry goods, they mastered the art of preserving other essentials. Deep in the lowest levels, you would find the winemaking facilities with their large, carved fermentation vats and storage jars. The cool, dark conditions were perfect for producing and aging wine, which was not just a dietary staple, but also a safe source of hydration when water might be scarce. Similarly, olive oil, another critical source of calories and nutrients, was stored in these cool depths in large ceramic amphorae, safe from going rancid in the heat. Every single meal consumed underground was a testament to this brilliant passive food technology. A family sharing a simple stew of dried lentils and barley was eating food that had been harvested under the sun, then brought into the earth to be kept perfectly fresh by the eternal cool of the stone. It was a silent partnership with the geology itself, a promise from the deep earth that they would not be forgotten. The great stone doors were only the first layer of a deeply embedded defensive strategy. If an enemy somehow passed those barriers, they entered a world designed to confuse, trap, and break them. The corridors themselves were the next weapon. These were not broad, welcoming hallways, but narrow, twisting passages that forced any invader to proceed in a single file. In the pitch darkness, lit only by the flickering torches they carried, a column of soldiers would be rendered helpless. They could not swing their swords, could not use their shields effectively, and could not see what lay around the next sharp, unexpected turn. This was a maze where every corner was a potential ambush point, deliberately carved to neutralize the advantages of a larger, organized force. The very architecture funneled them into vulnerability. From the ceilings above these choke points, small, hidden openings known as murder holes looked down. A defender standing in a dark chamber on a higher level could peer through these slots and see the invaders trapped below, completely unaware of the danger from above. Through these holes, they could thrust with long spears or pour boiling liquid, targeting the exposed heads and shoulders of the soldiers. It was a brutal, one-sided engagement. The attacker had no way to retaliate against an enemy they could not see or reach. Their only option a frantic, panicked retreat through the same claustrophobic labyrinth. But the city's tactics were not purely defensive. A network of secret tunnels known only to the inhabitants crisscrossed the complex. These were not main thoroughfares, but hidden arteries connecting different sections, sometimes even leading to concealed exits far from the main entrance. This gave the defenders a stunning tactical advantage. They could move silently and invisibly through their own city, appearing behind an invading force that believed it was pushing forward. Imagine the terror of a soldier who hears a stone slab slide open silently behind him, cutting off his retreat, or who finds himself suddenly attacked from a corridor he was certain his group had already cleared. These hidden passages allowed for devastating counterattacks and, if all else failed, provided a final, desperate means of escape for the population. The entire city was a living trap, a three-dimensional puzzle where the inhabitants held the only map. Every narrow corridor, every murder hole, every secret door worked in concert, turning the invaders' strength, their numbers and their weapons into their greatest liabilities in the oppressive, weaponized darkness. This leaves us with the most profound puzzle of all. Who were the master architects capable of such a monumental feat of engineering? The silence of history is almost as deep as the cities themselves, with no written records left behind to name the original builders. The soft tuff holds the marks of their tools but not their names, forcing archaeologists to become detectives piecing together a story from fragments. One compelling theory points to the Phrygians, an Iron Age people known for their sophisticated rock-cut monuments. They possessed the skills and inhabited this region centuries before the Common Era, and it is plausible they began the first, simple excavations, creating the foundational layers that others would later expand. Yet the scale and complexity of the cities we see today seem to go far beyond what the Phrygians alone might have needed. This is where the early Christian theory gains its powerful momentum. We know with certainty that these communities used and dramatically enlarged the cities, turning them into the vast refuges that sheltered thousands from Roman persecution. But did they start from scratch, or did they find a network of ancient shelters and simply build upon a plan that was already centuries old? The evidence is frustratingly ambiguous. The cities show clear signs of having been built in distinct phases, with architectural styles and carving techniques that seem to span different eras. A doorway might be Phrygian in its design, while the church at the bottom level is unmistakably Byzantine. It is as if each generation found the hidden city and added its own chapter, building upon the work of their forgotten predecessors. This layering of history is what makes a single, simple answer so elusive. Without a royal inscription or a buried ledger, we are left with a magnificent collaborative mystery, a subterranean masterpiece whose first architects willingly vanished into the very stone they carved. The identity of the builders may be shrouded in mystery, but the purpose of these cities is etched into their very design. They were not built for permanent dwelling, but as a last resort, a secret weapon against annihilation. The primary threat that forced entire populations to vanish for months on end was the relentless wave of invasions that swept across Anatolia for centuries. From the 7th to the 14th centuries, this region was a bloody crossroads. First came the Arab armies, launching raids from the south and east, seeking to expand their caliphate and plunder the wealthy Byzantine territories. Later, the Mongol hordes descended with a terrifying speed and ferocity, leaving destruction in their wake. These were not armies that could be met in an open field by local farmers and priests. The only viable strategy was to disappear. The cities were a defensive masterpiece born of sheer necessity. When scouts spotted dust clouds on the horizon or received word of an approaching force, a well-rehearsed drill would begin. The entire community, from the youngest child to the oldest elder, would gather their most vital possessions, herd their livestock down the ramps, and descend into the earth. The great stone doors would be rolled into place, sealing them off from the world. Above ground, the landscape would appear utterly deserted, a silent, empty land of fairy chimneys and valleys, giving no hint of the 20,000 lives thriving just beneath the surface. For the invaders, it must have been bewildering. They would find villages seemingly abandoned, with food and valuables gone, yet no people to be found and no trails to follow. They were fighting an enemy that had simply melted into the stone. Life underground during these sieges was a test of endurance, governed by strict rationing and the constant low hum of anxiety. The community lived by the supplies they had so carefully stored, measuring out grain and water, always listening for sounds from above. The only connection to the outside world was through the cleverly disguised ventilation shafts, which brought not only air but also faint echoes of the world they had left behind. The sounds of hooves and foreign shouts slowly fading into silence as the invaders, finding nothing to conquer, eventually moved on. This ability to wait out the storm, to endure months of darkness and confinement, was their ultimate victory. It was a strategy that turned the very land against the enemy, making the earth itself a shield and a sanctuary for civilization. But the genius of these cities may not be confined to their individual borders. What if the true scale of this achievement was not just vertical but horizontal? A growing body of evidence suggests that these were not isolated fortresses, but nodes in a vast, interconnected network, linked by secret tunnels stretching for miles beneath the Cappadocian landscape. The idea is staggering. A person could potentially travel from one city to another without ever setting foot on the surface, moving through a hidden highway system carved deep within the earth. Explorers have indeed discovered several long, subterranean passageways connecting different settlements. These are not the narrow corridors of a single city, but tunnels wide enough for people to move in single file, extending for remarkable distances. The most famous confirmed example is the nearly 10-kilometer tunnel linking the cities of Cappadocia and Derinkuyu. This was not a casual dig. It was a monumental engineering project, a deliberate and calculated effort to tether two major population centers together in secret. Imagine the strategic advantage this provided. If one city was discovered and its main entrance besieged, its population could theoretically escape through this hidden artery, flowing silently to the safety of their neighbor miles away. Resources, information, and reinforcements could be moved between strongholds, creating a resilient, distributed defense system that no surface army could ever hope to dismantle. It transforms our understanding from a collection of independent refuges into a single, unified subterranean nation. Yet, proving the full extent of this network is one of archaeology's greatest challenges. Many of these long tunnels are partially or completely collapsed, blocked by centuries of erosion and seismic shifts. Others may have been deliberately sealed in antiquity, their entrances hidden so well they have yet to be rediscovered. Venturing into these passages is a dangerous endeavor, requiring specialists to navigate unstable rock and pockets of deadly, trapped gases. Each step into an unexplored tunnel is a step into the unknown, holding the potential to either connect two known points on the map or to lead to a third, still undiscovered city waiting silently in the dark. The very soil of Cappadocia seems to guard its final secret, that beneath the feet of every visitor, a lost web of stone roads may still lie buried, a testament to a civilization that chose to connect its world below rather than on the surface. Of all the underground cities, Derinkuyu is the undisputed king, a labyrinth that embodies the absolute peak of this subterranean ambition. Its sheer scale is difficult to comprehend, a complex that plunges down 18 stories into the Earth's crust. To stand at its deepest accessible point is to be buried under nearly 90 meters of solid rock, a depth that would swallow a 20-story building. This was not a mere shelter, it was a fully realized inverted metropolis, a testament to human ingenuity under pressure. Archaeologists estimate that at its peak, Derinkuyu could have sustained up to 20,000 individuals for months on end. Every single one of those levels had a purpose, a carefully planned function in the grand machine of survival. The upper floors buzzed with the practicalities of life, with stables for livestock, communal kitchens, and sprawling storage chambers. But as you descend, the city reveals its more profound and surprising dimensions. Deep within its middle layers, explorers found a dedicated missionary school, complete with separate study rooms and a large circular hall for gatherings. Here, in the absolute quiet of the stone, new converts could be educated in the secrets and scriptures of their faith, far from the hostile eyes of the world above. This was a place for preserving not just bodies but belief itself, ensuring their culture would endure even if they did not. Further down still, in the cool, stable depths, lay the industrial heart of the city. A fully operational winery with its own deep well and large fermentation vats carved directly into the floor allowed them to produce a vital staple. The wine provided essential calories, safe hydration, and likely a small comfort during the long, dark months of confinement. But the true masterpiece of Derinkuyu, the single feature that guaranteed its existence, is a monumental ventilation shaft that takes your breath away. This is not a narrow pipe but a colossal chimney over 50 meters deep that connects the surface to the very bottom levels. It served as the city's primary lung, but its genius was its duality. The same shaft also functioned as an incredibly deep well, tunneling past the living quarters to tap directly into the underground water table. This meant that the city's two most vital, non-negotiable resources, air and water, were supplied through a single, massively protected structure. Enemies on the surface would see only a small, disguised opening, completely unaware that it was the lifeline for an entire civilization thriving silently in the abyss below. Just a few miles from the colossal depth of Derinkuyu lies its sister city, Cappadocia, a labyrinth built not down but out. If Derinkuyu is a towering subterranean skyscraper, then Cappadocia is a sprawling, single-story warehouse complex, its 4 open levels spreading wide beneath the earth. This fundamental difference in design speaks volumes about a different kind of community, one organized for a more fluid and perhaps more frequent form of refuge. The moment you descend into Cappadocia, the scale shifts. The ceilings feel lower, the corridors branch out more generously, and the entire space feels less like a deep fortress and more like a functional underground town square. The first level you encounter is almost entirely dedicated to the stables. This was not a mere buffer zone, but a massive, centralized livestock depot. The walls are lined with tethering holes and carved-out feeding troughs, and the air would have been thick with the presence of animals. The sheer size of this stable area suggests that Cappadocia was a central hub for a community whose wealth and survival were deeply tied to their herds. When danger came, they did not just bring a few animals down with them. They brought their entire economy, moving their most vital, mobile assets underground for safekeeping. This points to a society of pastoralists, people whose lives revolved around sheep, goats, and cattle. The city's wider, more accessible design would have made it far easier to manage large numbers of animals in a confined space, with ramps and passages allowing for a surprisingly efficient flow of traffic. Living quarters and storage areas are found on the subsequent levels, but they feel integrated, less strictly segregated than in Derinkuyu. The entire complex has a more open, communal feel, as if the population was accustomed to moving between these spaces regularly. This layout suggests that Cappadocia may have been used more often, perhaps for shorter periods during frequent raids, rather than the long, total sieges that Derinkuyu was engineered to withstand. It was a place to wait out a passing storm, not to survive a months-long winter of conflict. The very rock seems to tell a story of a community that lived closer to the surface, both physically and in its daily rhythms. Its refuge designed for agility and rapid deployment rather than for a long, drawn-out war of attrition in the deep dark. While Derinkuyu and Kamakli are the giants of this hidden world, the story of Cappadocia is told just as powerfully in its smaller, more specialized cities. Look at the city of Erzkanak, a labyrinth carved into the slopes of Mount Idis. What sets this city apart is its intricate internal communication system. Between the different levels, the builders carved hundreds of narrow, vertical holes, just wide enough for a voice to travel through or for a thin pipe to be inserted. These were not ventilation shafts, they were the city's ancient intercom. A whisper from the deepest storage chamber could be passed clearly up to the guard posts near the surface, relaying messages about food supplies or security without a single person having to move. This allowed for an astonishing level of coordination in total darkness, enabling the defenders to act as a single, informed entity. It was a network of stone telephones, a system that turned the entire city into a living, breathing intelligence organism, all while remaining utterly silent to any enemy who might have breached the upper halls. Then there is Tatlarin, a city that speaks not through secret passages but through breathtaking art. While many underground chapels are simple and unadorned, Tatlarins are a riot of color and faith. Its walls are covered in some of the most well-preserved and vibrant frescoes in all of Cappadocia. Here, in the deep dark, you can stand before brilliantly painted scenes of saints and biblical stories, their rich blues, reds, and golds still vivid after 1,000 years. These were not just places of worship, they were declarations of identity. In a life stripped down to bare survival, the community of Tatlarin invested immense effort into creating beauty, into surrounding themselves with images of their faith as a direct counter to the fear and uncertainty of their existence. The existence of these two cities, one a masterpiece of practical engineering and the other a sanctuary of profound artistry, shows us that this underground civilization was not a monolith. Each community adapted the core idea of the subterranean refuge to its own specific needs, its own unique fears, and its own powerful hopes. They were all solving the same fundamental problem of survival, but they expressed their solution in different languages, one spoken through holes in the rock, and the other painted in brilliant, defiant color on the walls of a sanctuary buried deep beneath the earth. Some of these stones may hold memories far older than any written history. While the early Christian narrative is powerful and well supported, it cannot fully explain every mystery found in the deepest, most ancient levels. This has led to more speculative theories that push the origins of these cities back into a much deeper, almost mythological past. Could the first chisels that struck this soft rock have been wielded not by persecuted Christians, but by a prehistoric people surviving a cataclysm lost to time? One of the most compelling, if controversial, ideas connects the cities to a global flood narrative. Ancient texts like the Epic of Gilgamesh and later the Book of Genesis speak of a great deluge that wiped the earth clean. What if the first subterranean levels were not built to hide from human armies, but from rising, apocalyptic waters? These deep, multi-level shelters, carved high in the Anatolian plateau, would have been perfect arcs of stone, protecting a chosen few from a world-destroying flood. This theory suggests the Christians did not build these cities from scratch, but rediscovered and repurposed a network of antediluvian refuges, a survival system created for a threat of biblical proportions. Another layer of mystery is added by the Greek historian Xenophon. In his work Anabosses, written in the 4th century before the Common Era, he describes the people of Anatolia living in underground homes with entrances so narrow they could only be entered by a ladder. His account predates significant Christian presence in the region by centuries, proving that subterranean habitation was an established practice long before the rise of the Byzantine Empire. But who were these people he described? Were they the descendants of even earlier builders, their true origins already fading into legend by Xenophon's time? The architectural evidence itself is puzzling. In the deepest, most primitive sections of some cities, the carving techniques are crude, almost frantic, unlike the more refined and organized work found in the upper Christian levels. A few researchers point to strange, circular carvings and symbols that do not match any known Phrygian or Byzantine art, suggesting the work of a completely different culture. Could these be the forgotten signatures of a prehistoric society that carved its first shelter with stone tools, a people whose name and language have been utterly erased by the millennia? These theories remain on the fringes of mainstream archaeology, lacking the conclusive proof of a single, datable artifact from that impossibly remote era. Yet they persist because they answer a haunting question: why would anyone begin such a monumental, back-breaking task without an equally monumental threat? The cities feel like a legacy, a profound secret passed down through ages, with each new generation of inhabitants adding their own layer to a blueprint whose original architect remains a ghost in the stone. The world shrank to the dimensions of a stone corridor. Once the great doors rolled shut, sealing the community in and the threat out, a new and grueling reality began. Every breath, every morsel of food, every drop of water was now accounted for, a finite resource against an unknown timeline. The psychological weight of this confinement was immense. There was no sunrise to mark the days, no sunset to promise rest, only the perpetual, suffocating darkness broken by the faint, dancing light of oil lamps. Time became a strange, elastic thing, measured not in hours but in the changing of guards, the distribution of meals, and the rhythm of communal prayers. The constant, low hum of anxiety was a presence in itself, a tension that hung in the cool air, fed by every distant, muffled sound from the ventilation shafts that might be the wind, or might be the enemy testing their defenses just overhead. Strict rationing was the first and most critical law of survival. The vast stores of grain in the bell-shaped silos were not a buffet but a sacred trust. A council of elders or appointed leaders would have managed the distribution with an iron will, calculating exactly how much could be consumed each day to stretch the supplies for months. A single family hoarding extra food could mean starvation for another, and in such a closed system, that kind of selfishness was a death sentence for the entire community. Water from the deep wells was guarded just as fiercely. Every person received a daily allotment for drinking and cooking, with severe penalties for wasting a single drop. This was not a life of comfort, but one of disciplined endurance, where every individual understood that their personal survival was inextricably linked to the well-being of the whole. In this pressurized environment, every able-bodied person had a role. Young, strong men and women would have taken shifts on guard duty, not at the sealed main entrance but at the internal defensive points. They would stand for hours in the cold, silent darkness near the murder holes and rolling stone doors, their ears straining for any sound of scraping or digging from the blocked passages above. Their vigilance was the community's early warning system. Others were tasked with the endless work of maintenance, ensuring the ventilation shafts remained clear, monitoring the wastewater channels, and checking the structural integrity of the living quarters. The sound of a chisel tapping softly against rock, making a small repair, would have been a common, reassuring noise, a symbol of their commitment to this underground world. Yet, a society cannot survive on vigilance and rationing alone. The human spirit needs connection to ward off despair. This is where the communal spaces became the true heart of resistance. In the shared kitchens, the act of preparing a simple, rationed meal together became a social event, a chance to talk in hushed voices and share stories. The churches, carved deep in the most secure levels, were not just for weekly worship but for daily solace. Here, in the flickering lamplight that illuminated the painted saints on the walls, the community would gather to sing soft hymns and listen to readings from their sacred texts. These moments of collective faith and shared culture were as vital as the grain in the silos. They reinforced their identity and their purpose, reminding everyone that they were not just hiding but preserving a way of life. Children would be taught their lessons in these stone rooms, their young voices learning the stories and skills they would need to carry their culture forward. The entire city became a single, large family, bound together by a shared ordeal. A child's laughter echoing down a corridor, the shared warmth of a communal oven, the quiet strength of a whispered prayer. These were the small, daily victories that held the darkness at bay, proving that even buried under a mountain of rock, the light of community could not be extinguished. The great stone doors rolled open for the last time, and the people emerged into a world that no longer demanded they live in the dark. The slow, quiet abandonment of the underground cities was not the result of a single battle lost, but a gradual shift in the very nature of power and safety. The age of relentless, unpredictable raids began to wane with the consolidation of the Byzantine Empire and later the rise of the Ottoman Empire. These were vast, bureaucratic states that sought to control and tax the land, not merely plunder it. For the first time in centuries, a degree of stable, centralized authority meant that a farmer could potentially live his entire life without ever seeing an invading army crest the horizon. The primary reason for the city's existence had simply faded away. Why endure the harsh, confined life underground when you could build a sunlit home on the surface, tend your fields in the open air, and sleep under the stars without fear? The descent into the earth, once a well-rehearsed drill for survival, became an increasingly distant memory, a story told by grandparents to wide-eyed children. Yet, the cities were not entirely forgotten, they were repurposed. Their cool, constant temperatures made them perfect natural cellars. The upper levels of many complexes became storage spaces for potatoes, onions, and lemons, their vast granaries now holding the harvests of a more peaceful era. The deep chambers, once filled with the murmurs of prayer, fell into a profound and lasting silence, visited only occasionally. The final push towards complete abandonment came from the very material that had made them possible, the soft, tough rock itself. While easy to carve, this stone is also vulnerable to erosion. Over the centuries, earthquakes, a constant feature in this seismically active region, shook the labyrinths, collapsing corridors and blocking vital shafts. Water seepage, working over generations, softened walls and caused entire ceilings to crumble. Maintaining these vast subterranean structures required a communal effort that was no longer justified by any clear and present danger. A collapsed passage in a stable, peaceful world was not an emergency to be fixed, but a reason to simply stop using that part of the city. The entrances were gradually reclaimed by the landscape, covered by rock slides, soil, and hardy shrubs. Within a few generations, the knowledge of their precise locations became the stuff of local legend, a secret held by a handful of shepherds and elders. The cities did not vanish in a day, they faded like a footprint in sand, slowly filled by the wind and time until nothing remained on the surface to hint at the bustling, hidden world below. That accidental discovery in 1963 was just the beginning. A local man, simply renovating his home in Derinkuyu, broke through a basement wall and found himself staring into a void that had been sealed for centuries. He had not found a small storage room, but the entrance to a lost world. Word of the find spread like wildfire, first through the small town and then to the wider world of academia. Soon, teams of archaeologists arrived, armed not with shovels but with measuring tapes, sketchpads, and a growing sense of awe. Their first and most daunting task was to map the abyss. They descended into the darkness with ropes and lanterns, carefully documenting each level, each corridor, and each mysterious chamber. It was a painstaking process, like untangling a giant, three-dimensional knot made of stone. They had to clear centuries of accumulated dust and debris, often finding their way blocked by rockfalls from ancient earthquakes. Every room they cleared revealed another piece of the puzzle: a winemaking press, a church with faded frescoes, a rolling stone door still poised in its track. The scale of their discovery slowly dawned on them. This was not a single shelter, but an entire city, meticulously engineered and breathtakingly vast. The archaeological work did not stop with Derinkuyu. As the significance of the find became clear, surveys began across the Cappadocia region. Locals came forward with stories of strange holes in their fields or cellars that seemed to go on forever. Each tip led to another investigation, and another city was added to the map. Cappadocia was explored and opened to the public, revealing its own unique, sprawling layout. Volcanic was found with its sophisticated communication shafts, and Tatlarin with its stunningly preserved art. To date, over 200 of these subterranean settlements have been identified, and many researchers believe there are still more waiting silently beneath the soil, their entrances hidden by time. The work of preservation is a constant battle against the elements. The same soft tuff that made the cities possible also makes them fragile. Water seepage, erosion, and the ever-present risk of earthquakes mean that stabilizing these ancient structures is a top priority. Archaeologists and engineers work together to reinforce ceilings, shore up walls, and install subtle lighting systems that allow visitors to experience the cities without damaging the delicate environment. Every step taken on the modern walkways is a step through a carefully conserved piece of human history. The initial curiosity of one man in his basement has blossomed into a lifelong mission for countless experts, all dedicated to understanding and protecting one of the most incredible stories of survival ever told. Less than half of the sprawling labyrinth of Derinkuyu is considered safe for visitors. Beyond the steel railings and modern lighting systems, a vast, silent darkness remains, a network of collapsed passages and sealed chambers that no human has entered for centuries. This is not a finished story, but an ongoing archaeological dig into the heart of the mystery. The work of mapping this subterranean world continues, with new technologies leading the charge. Ground-penetrating radar is now the key to seeing through solid rock. Scientists slowly sweep the Cappadocian landscape with these devices, which send electromagnetic pulses deep into the earth. The returning signals paint a ghostly image on a screen, revealing the outlines of hollow spaces, tunnels, and entire undiscovered rooms hidden far below the surface. It is like having a supernatural ability to see into the bedrock, and the maps it produces are constantly being redrawn. Every year, these scans point to new anomalies, suggesting that the network of cities is far more extensive than the 200 already known. A small, unassuming hole in a farmer's field, once dismissed as a natural sinkhole, can be scanned and revealed as the potential entrance to a completely new city, a hidden node in this ancient underground web. The painstaking work of excavation then begins. Teams of archaeologists, often working in cramped and dangerous conditions, carefully remove millennia of debris by hand, hoping to connect a known city to one of these newly discovered voids. What drives them is the tantalizing possibility of a truly monumental find, perhaps a city even larger than Derinkuyu, still sealed and perfectly preserved, waiting in the dark with its tools, its art, and its stories perfectly intact. Each new chamber they uncover adds another sentence to a history book that is still being written, proving that the full scale of this underground civilization is a secret the Earth is still reluctant to surrender. Walking through the modern entrance is like stepping into a different dimension of time. You leave behind the bright Turkish sun and the chatter of the world above, descending a steep, narrow ramp into the earth. The air changes instantly, becoming cool and still, carrying the faint, ancient scent of dust and stone. Your world shrinks to the circle of light from the modern bulbs strung along the path, their glow illuminating walls scarred by the chisels of people who sought refuge here over 1,000 years ago. The corridors are so tight in places that you have to turn sideways to pass through, the cold rock brushing your shoulders, a constant physical reminder of the claustrophobic reality of life down here. Then, just as the narrowness begins to feel overwhelming, the passage opens up into a vast, soaring chamber, a cavernous space that could hold hundreds of people. This dramatic shift from cramped tunnel to immense hall is a visceral experience, a direct feeling of the city's brilliant defensive design, its ability to make you feel both trapped and liberated within the same labyrinth. The guides who lead these tours are the keepers of the city's stories, their voices echoing softly as they point out the details a casual eye might miss. They show you the grooves in the floor where the massive stone door once rolled, the soot stains on the ceiling of a communal kitchen from 1,000 forgotten meals, and the small, carved niches where a family would have placed their simple oil lamp. They translate the silent language of the stone, turning empty rooms back into spaces full of life, fear, and resilience. This booming tourism is a double-edged sword for the preservation of the cities. The revenue from ticket sales is vital, funding the ongoing archaeological work, the structural reinforcements, and the careful conservation of the fragile frescoes in places like Tatlarin. Without these funds, the cities might remain hidden and crumble away unnoticed. Yet, the very presence of thousands of visitors each day introduces new threats. The moisture from human breath and perspiration slowly degrades the soft, tough walls. The constant vibration of footsteps, however gentle, contributes to microscopic erosion. Conservationists walk a delicate line, installing discrete steel supports and non-slip walkways to protect both the visitors and the ancient structures, all while trying to minimize the visual impact on this sacred space. Every measure is a compromise between allowing access and ensuring this underground world endures for generations to come. To stand in that deep, silent chapel and see the faint, beautiful paintings on the wall is to feel a direct connection to the past, but the very act of being there to witness it means we are now part of the city's ongoing story, charged with the responsibility of becoming its next guardians. Even with all we have uncovered, the silent stone still guards its deepest secrets. The true scale of the network remains one of the most tantalizing puzzles. We know of over 200 cities, but ground-penetrating radar consistently reveals unexplored voids and tunnels stretching far beyond the mapped areas. How many more cities lie completely buried, their entrances lost to time, and were they all connected in a single, continent-spanning web beneath the plains of Cappadocia? This leads directly to another enigma, the true age of the very first digs. While we can date Christian frescoes and Byzantine artifacts, the earliest, most primitive levels are devoid of such clues. The crude carving styles and mysterious symbols in these deep chambers suggest a much older origin, but without a single datable object from those first excavations, the identity of the original architects is a ghost in the rock. Was this a project started by the Phrygians, or could it have been a prehistoric people responding to a forgotten cataclysm, their story erased by millennia? Then there is the question of sheer human capacity. Our estimate of 20,000 people in Derinkuyu is just that, an estimate. Could the entire network, if fully operational, have sustained 50,000 or even 100,000 souls? The calculations of food storage, water supply, and airflow for such a population defy belief, suggesting a level of social organization and urban planning we have yet to fully comprehend. Finally, we must ask if refuge was their only purpose. Were these labyrinths solely defensive, or did they ever serve another, more mysterious function? Could the deepest, most isolated chambers have been used for secret rituals, for safeguarding forbidden knowledge, or as a permanent home for a spiritual order that had utterly renounced the world above? The cities answer many questions about survival, but in their deepest, darkest silence, they pose even greater ones about the lost chapters of our own history. The silent, dark corridors of Cappadocia stand as a permanent monument to the human spirit's refusal to be extinguished. This was not merely an act of digging, but a mind-boggling feat of long-term engineering, urban planning, and psychological endurance, all achieved with the simplest of tools. They transformed a soft, volcanic rock into a life support system, creating a world where thousands could not only hide but truly live for months on end. The legacy of these cities is a powerful testament to our shared capacity for ingenuity in the face of existential threats. It proves that when survival is on the line, human creativity can carve a civilization from the very earth itself. These people looked into the heart of the mountain and saw not a tomb but a sanctuary, a fortress, and a home. Their story challenges us to consider what we are capable of when pushed to the brink. What other forgotten marvels of human resilience are still hidden, waiting for their story to be told? We would love to hear which ancient enigma captures your imagination. Share your thoughts in the comments below and tell us which mystery we should explore together next.